Plankton is many things: a supervillain, a failed restaurateur, a creature with a computer fetish. But above all else, he is a criminal, which is why we're looking at his crimes today. In Plankton, our criminal hero makes his debut appearance by trying to outsmart SpongeBob, the one guy in Bikini Bottom who lacks a brain to manipulate. Rookie error. The episode kicks off at the Krusty Krab with Squidward sending SpongeBob an order for a Krabby Patty. As per usual, SpongeBob is doing tricks and making it look like the patty pops out of Squidward's nose. The usual dumbass SpongeBob antics that will piss off the health inspector. But then something weird happens. The patty starts sliding across the floor by itself, which is definitely a reason to shut the place down, but it turns out it's just Plankton trying to steal the burger again because his dumbass doesn't have anything better to do. Mr. Krabs catches him right before he can escape, flinging him back to the chum bucket and giving SpongeBob the usual warning about Plankton's never-ending schemes to swipe the secret formula. You know, like, "Don't let him get near it, tiny little asshole, blah blah blah." Later, when the Krusty Krab closes for the day, SpongeBob heads home, but Plankton pops up and tries a whole new angle, claiming that because they're both invertebrates, they should be pals, which is a weird way to approach anybody. Major stranger danger vibes. He even invites SpongeBob to his birthday party and hands him a shiny golden spatula as a gift. But SpongeBob, while a giant moron, is not a total moron. He knows this is a trap. So SpongeBob's all like, "Cool, what do you want, a booster seat?" Which cracks Plankton up, but then Plankton drops the real plan. He wants a Krabby Patty as his birthday present, a big juicy hunk of meat for his big day, but SpongeBob doesn't play with that. He knows Plankton. It's not happening. But of course, Plankton doesn't give up. Later that night, he sneaks into SpongeBob's house while he's sleeping, crawls into one of SpongeBob's pores, and attaches a mind control device to his brain, which is and very illegal. I mean, it's basically brainwashing or assault of the brain. It's non-consensual is what I'm saying. Don't brain people while they sleep, bro. Now, Plankton's in control, and SpongeBob is basically just along for the ride, so Plankton makes SpongeBob walk past Squidward's house and insult his neighbor, leaving Squidward totally confused and low-key offended. Like, for once, Squidward's not being an asshole. Weird. SpongeBob realizes what's happening and tries to fight back, but Plankton just laughs it off and pushes ahead with his plan anyway because who cares if he says no? With SpongeBob totally under his control, Plankton forces him to steal a Krabby Patty and bring it back to the chum bucket, where he's ready to analyze the patty to finally uncover the secret formula. But just when it looks like Plankton might actually win, SpongeBob starts talking about how delicious the patty is, and Plankton just can't resist. He leaps out of SpongeBob's head, ready to devour it, but instead he bounces off and ends up trapping himself in his analyzer, confirming once and for all that Plankton is a dumbass. SpongeBob, now free from this illegal invasion, happily takes the Krabby Patty and heads home, while Plankton, stuck inside the machine, begs for fries. SpongeBob just walks off, leaving Plankton as frustrated as ever. What the hell did he think was gonna happen when he forced his way into the guy's mind? Like, bro, come on now! Order takeout like the rest of us. Don't be a little about it. But being a little is what Plankton is best at. Case in point, Goo Goo Gas, an episode where Plankton decides the best way to get what he wants is to turn his enemies into literal babies. The episode kicks off with Plankton, as usual, trying to steal a Krabby Patty because the writers decided he has nothing more interesting about him. This time he's disguised as a pepper shaker, but Mr. Krabs quickly catches on when he notices the P on the shaker. I have no idea how he noticed that, but I guess his beady eyes see more than coins and dollar bills. So, having been busted again, Plankton sits on a park bench all frustrated when he overhears a lady saying she can take anything from her baby because the baby can't fight back. Wait, what the lady? You willingly steal from your own child because they can't fight back? We need to change the title of this video. Anyway, there's a light bulb moment for Plankton. He hatches this genius, or kinda dumb plan, to turn Mr. Krabs into a baby so he can finally get the upper hand. It's weird, bro. So Plankton sets up his trap with a telephone booth and some money bait, and Mr. Krabs is so stupid and horny for money that he just blindly follows it. Then, with a quick spray of his goo-goo gas, Mr. Krabs is transformed into Baby Krabs. So the plan worked and Mr. Krabs is a idiot. But hey, surprise! Turns out that babies aren't as useless in Bikini Bottom as they are in real life. Baby Krabs starts gnawing on Plankton's body immediately, which is deserved after Plankton has basically abducted and brainwashed Krabs into being a big baby. But then here comes dumbass number 2. SpongeBob himself turns up and takes Baby Krabs, having absolutely no understanding of what's going on. Like, zero. Apparently he just sees babies and takes them? Bro's on something sketchy. So Plankton accidentally spills his whole plan and SpongeBob calls the cops, presumably to cover up his whole baby stealing business he seems to have going on. But of course, Plankton escapes to continue his scheme. Back at the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob tries to soothe Baby Krabs and finds that the only thing to shut him up is a stack of 20s. Kinda like Boss Baby or the strippers downtown. Plankton comes back with more goo-goo gas, and this time he sprays both Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob, thinking that more babies will solve his problem. Bro's about to learn a valuable lesson. 'Cause when he sprays that, only Mr. Krabs turns back into his normal self. SpongeBob becomes a baby, so now Plankton keeps spraying them over and over, frustrated as the effects keep reversing. 2 sprays and you're back to your original form. You get the picture. He f***ed up in his big abduction and assault plan. So Plankton shifts gears to Plan B because his Plan A's are generally terrible. He pulls out the senior citizen spray, turning Mr. Krabs into an old man, thinking he's won. But SpongeBob delivers a sweet and frankly totally uninteresting speech about caring for seniors, which throws Plankton off. He's like, to the fuck assed. Plankton tries to spray SpongeBob too, turning him into an old sponge, but before he can celebrate, SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs, with the help of some elderly folks, knit a net and capture him. But he manages to escape as per usual. Plankton realizes he needs baby powder to perfect his baby formula, so he rushes to Bargain Mart, grabs some, and tests it on Karen, his beloved computer wife. Confident, he heads back to the Krusty Krab and sprays everyone. SpongeBob, Patrick, Squidward, and Mr. Krabs, turning them all into babies. Well, Patrick was already mentally 2 years old, so nothing really changes there. He's so close to victory, but baby SpongeBob accidentally cracks open the gas canister, which explodes and shrinks Plankton into a microscopic baby. Now, tiny and panicking, he realizes he doesn't have a diaper and cries out for one as the episode ends. It's always nice when an episode ends with the characters themselves. Real classic SpongeBob stuff. You don't see that much anymore. Krabs apparently agrees, as he spends the entirety of The Krusty Slammer converting the Krusty Krab into a prison-themed restaurant and prison just to try and punish Plankton, and maybe make him himself. Alright, so this episode starts with Plankton, of course, trying to sabotage the Krusty Krab as usual. Honestly, the real crime is how all these episodes start the same. Anyway, this time he's vandalizing it to make Mr. Krabs look bad. But the plan backfires as usual and Plankton gets arrested for his crime. So a cop takes him to the police station with Mr. Krabs tagging along, only to find out the station's totally overcrowded. Apparently Bikini Bottom is some kind of criminal underworld, which actually makes a lot of sense because none of these people are normal and I'm pretty sure a few of them are inbred. Anyway, instead of staying locked up, Plankton gets released because there's no space for prisoners, and of course Mr. Krabs sees an opportunity. He offers to turn the Krusty Krab into a prison, symbolically rolling a bowling ball with Plankton attached right back into the restaurant. I mean, what the f*** is he talking about? He's going to turn his friendly neighborhood business into a prison? Jeez. Now, Plankton, determined to escape, tries out various escape schemes, but all of them fail miserably because he is arguably the most inept person in all of Bikini Bottom. Mr. Krabs, as punishment, traps Plankton in one of SpongeBob's holes. Yep, you heard me right. Just shoves Plankton right into SpongeBob. No foreplay. It's actually pretty inconsiderate, and I'm 90% sure it's some kind of assault for one of them. Meanwhile, the police officer returns with more prisoners, turning the Krusty Krab into a full-blown jail complete with cells. When Mr. Krabs finally lets Plankton out of SpongeBob's hole, it's only to stuff him into a bottle labeled with the secret formula. SpongeBob, being his helpful self, gets into his new prison guard role, sending letters to prisoners and making sure they're taken care of. I'm not really sure he understands what the role of a prison guard is, though, because at no point does he even attempt to beat any of the prisoners to death for breathing. Mr. Krabs, on the other hand, is extra hard on Plankton, constantly keeping him in check. The cop eventually comes back to say Plankton's sentence is over and he's free to go. But Plankton leaves with a cryptic comment like, "I hope everything you're doing will be worth it, you decrepit old Okay, he didn't quite go that far, but, you know, subtext. Turns out SpongeBob has been treating the prisoners way too well, giving them all sorts of comforts and amenities, so they're living in luxury instead of praying for death. When Mr. Krabs realizes this, he's furious and strips everything from the prisoners, sparking a rebellion. The prisoners start pelting him with tomatoes, causing the regular customers to leave. Oh yeah, the regular customers were dining in a prison. Nothing goes better with a delicious meal than the smell of a prisoner's smeared on the walls. Fed up, Mr. Krabs releases all the prisoners, but the next day, they all return because they miss the cushy life SpongeBob gave them. Mr. Krabs, in his usual angry way, doesn't realize a cop is eating in the restaurant when he admits he released the prisoners early, which, surprise, surprise, is illegal. The cop arrests Mr. Krabs, who asks SpongeBob to book him a massage, but Mr. Krabs is sent to a different jail, the Chum Bucket, where Plankton gleefully locks him in a cage and forces him to eat chum while Mr. Krabs laments his fate. So yeah, it turns out that Plankton, the criminal mastermind, hired a corrupt cop of his own to basically turn the tables on Krabs. He's a little but I gotta admit, he's a pretty damn smart little I mean, if he wasn't smart, he wouldn't be coming up with ideas like Imitation Krabs, where he decides the best way to with Krabs' business is to become him, or a robot version of him. It's a very gray area of fraud. Okay, so this one kicks off with Plankton, yet again, trying to get his hands on the Krabby Patty secret formula. This time he's disguised as a robot salesman, trying to tempt SpongeBob with $1 million for the recipe. First off, A for effort, like damn bro. But SpongeBob, being loyal as ever, refuses, explaining that the formula belongs to Mr. Krabs and can't be shared. Frustrated, Plankton bursts out of the robot, threatening violence against SpongeBob, but gets swiftly launched back to the Chum Bucket via straw by Mr. Krabs. I guess this is the first warning that Plankton should be in prison in this episode. Threatening abuse after you've tried to scam someone is kinda wild, bro. Mr. Krabs reminds SpongeBob how important it is to keep the formula safe, which puts SpongeBob on high alert. So much so that he ends up attacking a random customer who mentions the formula thinking it's Plankton in disguise. To be fair, they had it coming looking like that, but Mr. Krabs reassures SpongeBob that everything will be fine if they only discuss the formula with him. Meanwhile, Plankton comes up with his next genius idea, a robotic Mr. Krabs. Okay, that one is pretty good. These morons would never have any idea about it. He first runs into Squidward, who's stuck doing inventory after making a snarky comment about procrastination or something. The robot tries to fool Squidward, but he knows it's not Mr. Krabs. It's behaving weird. But Squidward doesn't give a shit. He stays quiet in exchange for a day off. But then SpongeBob shows up, and while he notices some weird he thinks it's the real deal. To distract SpongeBob from realizing what's going on, Robot Krabs literally transforms into a toaster. And SpongeBob just goes, yeah, that checks out. Guy's cooked. Meanwhile, Plankton rolls a penny into Mr. Krabs' office, sending the real Krabs on a wild goose chase after it. With the real guy out of the picture, Robot Krabs asks SpongeBob for the formula, but first, they have to perform the secret handshake, which is just this ridiculous series of tasks like balancing chocolate milk on their heads and singing the Bikini Bottom national anthem. It's hard to know if SpongeBob is lying or not because he's weird. 6.5 hours of nonsense later, SpongeBob is still not giving up the formula. He says he won't speak it, but offers it in a bottle instead. Okay. But right as Robot Krabs goes to grab the bottle, Mr. Krabs returns, still chasing that penny. Then it turns into a showdown. Both the real and robotic Krabs claim to be the real one. SpongeBob decides to quiz them. The first 2 questions, both of the Krabses get them right. Dumbass. But the third one stumps even the real Mr. Krabs, so SpongeBob blasts him with tartar sauce and rolls him out. Thinking he successfully passed his own test, SpongeBob hands the formula over to Robot Krabs. But then, SpongeBob accidentally drops a penny into Robot Krabs' self-destruct slot. And by the way, who the makes a robot with a coin-operated self-destruct anyway? Like, you want to profit from your own failure? Come on, man! Rookie mistake! Plankton realizes his mistake too late, and the robot explodes, taking out the chum bucket in the process. Meanwhile, the real Mr. Krabs is stuck in a fry basket being threatened by Hans with a fork. SpongeBob rescues him, and all is forgiven, except for that penny which Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob is coming out of his paycheck. Bet that news makes you wish you could put a coin in his self-destruct slot, eh? Oh god, that sounds creepy. But Plankton is so determined to make people self-destruct that in Krabs vs. Plankton, he decides to escalate the feud and take Krabs to court over a totally invented injury. So, Plankton wakes up one day totally over it and without his usual scheme to steal the Krabby Patty formula, which feels really weird actually, and kinda wrong somehow. Anyway, he tells Karen he's just gonna wing it and heads to the Krusty Krab. But as soon as he walks in, the dumbass slips on the freshly mopped floor, and of course, Mr. Krabs laughs at him. Some random customer sees the whole thing and makes a totally unprovoked comment about how they'd sue if that happened to them, and try to get everything from Mr. Krabs' money to the secret formula. Well, what more do you need? Plankton gets that classic evil grin and pretends to be seriously injured. He even calls an ambulance and threatens to sue Krabs unless he hands over the formula. Mr. Krabs naturally refuses. He'd rather see the little prick die than do that. Now, Mr. Krabs is freaked out about losing everything, so he hires this lawyer named Richard A. Bottomfeeder, who promises he'll only charge if they win. But given that his name literally means ass eater, you can bet he's gonna be up Mr. Krabs' ass the second they lose the case. The plan? Countersue Plankton and take him for everything he's got. Basic lawyers. Ass eater isn't that original. But then, disaster strikes. Literally. Mr. Ass-Eater slips and gets his back blown out in the not-so-fun way right before the trial, leaving SpongeBob to take over with nothing but a briefcase he left behind, and no idea what's inside. When the trial starts, Plankton shows up in full dramatic mode, wheelchair cast, bandages, undiagnosed mental illness, the works. He gives this sob story that makes the jury feel sorry for him. Meanwhile, SpongeBob's fumbling around trying to open the briefcase, making Mr. Krabs look worse with each failed attempt. And when Squidward is called as a witness, he throws Mr. Krabs under the bus, complaining it's his first day off in 3 years. It's the last thing he needs. So now it looks like all hope is lost, but SpongeBob accidentally opens the briefcase, and what's inside? A Krabby Patty. Ass-Eater thought he was coming to lunch, apparently. SpongeBob uses it to bait Plankton into admitting his plan to steal the formula. Plankton cracks, tries to run off with the burger, but Mr. Krabs eats it right in front of him. The jury declares Krabs not guilty, though they still call him cheap, and Plankton gets arrested for his crime of fraud. In the end, Krabs thanks SpongeBob, and as a weirdly sweet gesture, SpongeBob gives him a homemade wet floor sign. But hey, it's free! Still though. Which pretty much sums up most of the characters like Plankton in The Inside Job, an episode where he plots to non-consensually enter Krabs' brain and manipulate him from within, and somehow still f***s it up. In this episode, Plankton is once again trying to steal the Krabby Patty secret formula with the help of his computer wife Karen. This time, they plan to launch Plankton directly into Mr. Krabs' brain, hoping that from there, Plankton can extract the formula. Again, with the mind man, this guy's hooked on that. Anyway, things quickly go awry when they accidentally miscalculate and launch Plankton into SpongeBob's brain instead, which, let's be real, is kind of a miracle. I don't think I've ever once assumed SpongeBob had a brain, at least not one worth paying attention to. It turns out SpongeBob was holding a cardboard cutout of Mr. Krabs, which threw off their aim, leading to the mix-up. I don't even have the energy to work out why he had a cardboard cutout or why he was holding it. Once inside SpongeBob's brain, Plankton improvises and heads for the optical system, hoping to watch SpongeBob make a Krabby Patty and reverse engineer the secret formula. But his tampering blinds SpongeBob, causing a major kitchen disaster. Unable to see, SpongeBob uses cleaning supplies and various random objects as ingredients, creating a disgusting mess and most likely the perfect food to assassinate someone. Plankton, watching the chaos unfold, realizes too late that SpongeBob isn't making a Krabby Patty at all, and he quickly abandons the optical system entirely. Is SpongeBob still blind? Who cares? Next, Plankton heads to the auditory system, planning to eavesdrop on the Krabby Patty recipe as SpongeBob asks Mr. Krabs for help. But this time, Plankton's interference renders SpongeBob unable to hear anything, leaving SpongeBob confused and Mr. Krabs yelling at the top of his lungs, which is pretty typical for them. Frustrated, Mr. Krabs tries using a megaphone, which blasts Plankton right out of SpongeBob's ear and restores SpongeBob's hearing. However, both SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs forget why they were even discussing the formula in the first place. Determined not to give up, Plankton ventures deeper into SpongeBob's brain, looking for what he believes to be the Command Central. Good luck, Dip. Instead of finding a strategic control center, Plankton stumbles into a spaghetti-like version of SpongeBob's Pineapple House. The inside of SpongeBob's brain is weird and pink, leaving Plankton utterly confused. He heads to a library within SpongeBob's mind, hoping to find something useful. While rummaging through SpongeBob's mental library, Plankton discovers that the Krabby Patty formula is stored in SpongeBob's heart, not his non-existent brain. Excited, Plankton slides down SpongeBob's spine toward the heart. Once there, he attempts to extract the formula, but something unexpected happens. Plankton is transformed into a clone of SpongeBob. Although he still retains his voice and unique eye, which now turns blue like SpongeBob's, Plankton is overtaken by SpongeBob's cheerful and kind personality. It's creepy. I don't like it. Now, acting just like SpongeBob, Plankton finds himself unable to follow through with his plan to steal the formula. When Karen contacts him for an update, Plankton, fully embodying SpongeBob's character, refuses to give her the formula, claiming it would be wrong to steal it. Enraged, Karen activates a propeller on Plankton's mind-reading hat, pulling him out of SpongeBob and flying him back to the chum bucket. But before he makes it back, Plankton accidentally bumps into Patrick and latches onto his head, absorbing Patrick's personality in the process, which arguably is worse than anything, even death. Now Plankton is a Patrick clone, complete with Patrick's dull-witted demeanor. Karen retrieves him just as he strolls past the chum bucket, but Plankton, now as clueless as Patrick, cannot remember the Krabby Patty formula or much of anything really. The episode ends with Karen left exasperated, dealing with a now Patrick-like Plankton. Basically, his brain is mush and he's a vegetable. Patrick 2.0. And much like Patrick, Plankton never learns. Like in The Algae's Always Greener, an episode where Plankton forces a life swap with Mr. Krabs and finds himself longing for the simplicity of being a good old-fashioned dick. The episode opens with Plankton, frustrated with his endless failures at stealing the Krabby Patty formula. He's becoming envious of Mr. Krabs' seemingly perfect yet somehow After yet another disappointing meal of holographic meatloaf, Plankton expresses his desire to switch places with Mr. Krabs. Karen, his computer wife, reminds him that he invented a transmogrifier, a device that can swap lives, and suggests he use it to experience Krabs' life for himself. It's like Freaky Friday, but for weird kind of homoerotic business rivals. Plankton follows Karen's advice and wakes up in an alternate universe where he has swapped places with Mr. Krabs. Now wearing Krabs' clothes and going by Mr. Plankton, he finds himself the successful owner of the Krusty Krab. Delighted with his new life, Mr. Plankton begins by asking alternate universe SpongeBob to bring him 2 Krabby Patties for inspection. Okay, I have to give it to the little jerk, he might have actually worked this thing out. However, Plankton's new life quickly turns chaotic. When SpongeBob arrives for his weekly performance review, he spirals into an emotional breakdown after Mr. Plankton casually critiques him for using a little too much sauce. In an effort to stop SpongeBob's meltdown, Mr. Plankton hastily promotes him to co-cashier, a decision that angers alternate universe Squidward, who is demoted to fry cook. Nobody is happy, and that is usually something Plankton would love, but not today. Just as Mr. Plankton tries to enjoy his newfound wealth, Pearl, his new daughter, demands an advance on her allowance. Mr. Plankton gives her $1, but Pearl can't live on a damn dollar, so she starts crying. But before Plankton can deal with her, a customer complains about Squidward's terrible cooking, while SpongeBob has another meltdown over a minor mistake. I mean, it's just one thing after another. Overwhelmed by the growing chaos, Mr. Plankton starts to regret his new life. Maybe it was better when he was just some tiny little loser. Things go from bad to worse when a siren goes off, signaling an imminent threat to the Krabby Patty's secret formula. The threat turns out to be alternate universe Mr. Krabs, now a villainous version of his former self simply called Krabs. He arrives naked for some weird reason I don't want to know, and attempts to steal a Krabby Patty. SpongeBob, armed with a clothes-shooting cannon, fights Krabs off, eventually trapping him in a bra. Krabs reluctantly surrenders the stolen patty, and the Krusty Krab crew celebrates with a triumphant victory speech. Despite their victory, Krabs vows to continue trying to steal the formula daily, exactly like Plankton does. Completely overwhelmed by the stress of running the Krusty Krab, managing the crew's antics, and fending off Krabs' theft attempts, Mr. Plankton realizes that Mr. Krabs' life is not as glamorous as he thought. Actually, he's discovering that he himself might be kind of a dick. In a fit of frustration, he strips off his clothes and presses the button to return to his original life. Plankton is transported back to the chum bucket where he sits in front of his holographic meatloaf once again. With a newfound appreciation for the simplicity of his old life, he eagerly digs into his holographic meal and plans to continue ruining Krabs' sucky life. Life is just easier when you're an asshole. An asshole like Sandy, which is why Plankton decides to combine his assholiness with Sandy's in Someone's in the Kitchen with Sandy, trying to convince everyone he is Sandy, which is a clear-cut case of fraud. It also makes him a psychopath. The episode begins, and Plankton's at it again, trying to steal the Krabby Patty formula, and this time his genius idea is to hide inside a sesame seed on a bun at the Krusty Krab. Classic Plankton move, right? It's always a fine line between a scheme and an unaliving attempt. Of course, SpongeBob unknowingly uses that exact bun to make a Krabby Patty for Sandy. Just as she's about to eat it, Plankton jumps out just in time, but then immediately passes out because, well, he forgot he needs water to breathe in Sandy's helmet. Is this a video about Plankton's crimes or Plankton's dumbassery? Both. So Sandy heads back to her tree dome, completely unaware of Plankton's near miss. She takes off her suit and helmet, hops into the shower, and casually hangs up her fur coat. Plankton, revived by some shower water, spots the fur coat and comes up with a whole new plan. He locks Sandy in the bathroom, swipes her fur coat, and zips over to the chum bucket. There he motorizes it, turning himself into a pretty convincing Sandy impersonator, so that's theft and identity fraud. Also, he has such a weird obsession with wearing other people's skins. That's serial killer Texas Plankton Massacre. So, in full furry squirrel disguise, Plankton struts back to the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob doesn't even question why Sandy isn't wearing her usual suit or helmet. He just buys the whole "I can breathe underwater now" story without a second thought. Plankton tries to weasel some Krabby Patty secrets out of SpongeBob, who's more than happy to share a few random burger tips, but nothing particularly helpful. Not that SpongeBob ever has any interest in saying anything helpful. Things are going great for Plankton until Mr. Krabs bursts in, announcing he's just going to leave the Krabby Patty formula out in plain sight. What? Plankton, still in Sandy's fur, is convinced he's finally hit the jackpot. How stupid can you get? Hard to think of a more blatant trap. Meanwhile, back at the tree dome, Sandy finishes her shower only to realize her fur coat is gone. Furious, she breaks out of the bathroom ready to hunt down the thief. But now she's a pink, hairless squirrel, and Bikini Bottom's residents are not kind, calling her all sorts of ridiculous names like Hairless Goat and Naked Chipmunk. That's cruel, but also, indecent exposure laws in Bikini Bottom need work. She tries to cover herself with seaweed, but it falls apart, leaving her even more exposed. Nice try, though. Back at the Krusty Krab, Plankton's disguise sort of falls apart too. SpongeBob insists on some overly precise burger building technique, and frankly, Plankton gets as pissed off as the rest of us. So he just ditches the act, grabs the formula, and makes a break for it. But just as he's about to escape, the real Sandy busts in, rolls up her fur coat, and traps him in a mustard jar. The police show up and Sandy thinks they're here for Plankton, but nope. They're here to arrest her for public nudity. I knew it. Bikini Bottom needs to close that loop. It was becoming a problem. Bad enough Squidward wanders around with his 8 legs hanging out. 9, depending on the angle. Sandy sighs as she's taken away, and Plankton gets away with his latest crime. But hey, one less naked squirrel on the streets is always a good thing, and nobody can convince me otherwise. But other people are not as immune to brainwashing. Chum Bucket Supreme sees Plankton brainwashing his customers into making his business a success. And you know what? If it's good enough for most American companies, it's good enough for him. The episode kicks off with 2 customers parking at the Chum Bucket, which makes Plankton think his luck's finally turning around. But nope, they just couldn't find parking at the Krusty Krab. So close, man. Karen, ever the practical computer, suggests that Plankton start an ad campaign, so puts up this insane nerdy sign for dweebs that says, "Chum is metabolic fuel." Of course, Patrick walks by and tries to read it, but his brain basically overheats because it's gibberish and smoke starts pouring out of his head. He cools off with some kelp juice and decides the sign needs simplifying, so he rearranges the letters to say, "Chum is fum." It's catchy, it's simple, it makes more sense, honestly. And suddenly, customers are flooding in. Plankton, stunned, hires Patrick as his official slogan manager. That is certainly a decision. Meanwhile, over at the Krusty Krab, Mr. Krabs is freaking out, convinced Plankton stole the Krabby Patty formula. What other explanation could there be for his success? So he ropes SpongeBob into a plan to infiltrate the Chum Bucket and steal the formula back. They wait in line for 2 hours, and when they finally get in, Plankton immediately sees through their awful disguises. Turns out, no secret formula has been stolen after all. The real trick is just Patrick's catchy slogan. Even though the chum still tastes horrible, the customers are totally into it, just because they keep repeating the silly line. See? Brainwashing works! Like and subscribe, like and subscribe, like and subscribe! Plankton checks in on Patrick's slogan work, hoping for new ideas, but Patrick's just written "Chum is fum" in different fonts over and over again. That's so lazy. Like and subscribe, like and subscribe. At first, Plankton's frustrated, but then he's like, wait, it's working, so who gives a shit? But a few days later, the novelty wears off and customers are losing interest. So Plankton and Patrick hold a 3-day brainstorming session. Patrick's big new idea? Fum is chum! Because Bikini Bottom is full of brain-dead simpletons, this reignites the hype and the Chum Bucket is booming again. Plankton even lands in restaurant magazines, and a whole undersea hockey team stops by to chow down on the regurgitated vomit Plankton calls food. But of course, Patrick, the creative genius that he is, decides he's burnt out. By which I mean he literally has a hole burned into the back of his head. Plankton panics and tries to act like he doesn't need Patrick, but while ranting over the intercom, he accidentally insults all his customers, calling them buffoons and morons. Again, absolutely true, but apparently not a good thing to do in a business environment. Naturally, the moronic buffoons storm out and the hockey team beats Plankton up as payback. Patrick ends up at the Krusty Krab working on their new slogan, "Krabby Patties are fum!" And as usual, his brain starts smoking again from all the effort. That's pretty much a reaction to watching all these episodes, too. It's a lot of fum and very overwhelming. Which is basically what Plankton does in SpongeBob's Last Stand, deciding to simultaneously attempt an animal genocide, corporate sabotage, and, worst of all, the building of a highway without the proper paperwork. I mean, come on, lock him up! So, Plankton's at it again. You already know the setup, but let's just move on. This time he's pulling a sneaky one by starting a huge project called the Shelly Superhighway, which is supposed to go right through Jellyfish Fields. Well, first of all, illegal move, because you know Plankton does not have the legal authority to build roads because he's a tiny fish who owns a failing restaurant. Sit the f down. But of course, this catches SpongeBob's attention because Jellyfish Fields is like his favorite place in the world, so he tries to get the town to stop it. Problem is, no one listens, and things get worse when SpongeBob realizes Mr. Krabs is actually backing the highway because he thinks it'll bring in more customers. And come on, who cares about jellyfish anyway? They're everywhere! But then SpongeBob finds out Plankton's the mastermind. And not only that, but Plankton's plan is to run the highway straight over the Krusty Krab to bankrupt crabs and funnel all the customers to the chum bucket, which, again, is an extremely illegal thing to do. An illegal highway and corporate sabotage? What are you, the U.S. government? When SpongeBob tells Mr. Krabs, they both confront Plankton, but by then, it's too late. The whole town's already approved it, and the townsfolk? Totally on Plankton's side. Who wouldn't be? He's practically running the town from his box. SpongeBob and Patrick try to protest with flyers and music, but the Bikini Bottomites are not having it. They even get arrested for trying to stop the highway. And while they're coming up with more ideas to save Jellyfish Fields, Plankton rolls in with his paver and starts construction, literally crushing the life out of the jellyfish's home without a care. Fast forward, and Bikini Bottom is a complete wreck. The highway's built, Jellyfish Fields is dead, and even the Krusty Krab is out of business. Mr. Krabs is just about ready to throw in the towel, handing the formula over to Plankton. But then, just as Plankton's about to win, the jellyfish revolt. They go berserk, stinging everyone in sight, including Plankton. Total chaos. I mean, I'm 90% sure that the whole town would be killed by the aggression of the whole thing. Finally, SpongeBob sees his chance. He rallies the townfolk and they all team up to destroy the highway. Even Plankton can't stop it. He literally gets crushed by his own paver. Jellyfish Fields is restored, the Krusty Krab is saved, and everyone's back to singing the jellyfishing song as if nothing happened. The whole episode was basically pointless, and we have wasted several minutes talking about it, so everybody wins, except Plankton. Who cares about him?